Uh, I had
So
a
do you
hat
have a
on
list of the
earlier.
questions Dietlind is going to ask? Because um,
Oh,
I'm
and there she
nervous.
is. Speaking
Uh-oh.
of, can you see us?
Hey, I can see you guys. I'm just
Hey,
turning the volume up.
Wait, but I can't see you. I just have a still image of you.
Yeah, you sure do.
from her
I
high school
see that.
yearbook.
But
Is that how you're? Is that how you're rolling? Just with the still image? There you
Hey,
go.
it's Dietlind.
okay, we're just gonna have to edit that part out.
Is this where you live, or did you rent this place?
This is I rented this, Richard.
Yeah, I rented mine also.
I rented this dog that's down here too. Can you see this dog over
Nice.
here? Yep, that's a rent-a-dog. No, this is my home office. I'm thinking about changing it up a little bit since I have all this time on my hands, but
Yeah, I keep thinking about it. I figured out how to hang my bike the other day. I needed a new place to hang it, so.
oh yeah, very nice.
Let me see. I had, because I did
So
this
we,
the other day. I was like, I'm sharing my screen with you so you can see. Look, there's Dietlind. Just chilling in her studio.
Oh yeah, that's what it looks like all the time when I'm painting.
You know, there's something about doing a Google image search of people. And then let's see. This one, which I really thought, this is you. This is you going like, no, here's what I think. You know, it's a good picture. I don't know what it's from.
I'll tell you what it's from. It's a still from a interview on TV about Maine College of Arts fundraising events, specifically I think our art sale. Yeah.
It's a good picture. And then this is the last one. This is you, because that could not be more. That's Dietlind having a laugh. That's good.
Yeah, that's also being interviewed on TV, I think. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
So,
very
there
funny.
you go.
Well, I'm just glad you didn't pull up the one where I won a case of beer at the Portland Trails fundraiser. I know I showed that one to you years
I think
ago.
you did share that with me one time. Yeah.
That's the clip that Kelly found that when she was doing a Google search, and she's like, "You got to figure out how to make this go away," you know. And I was like, I kind of feel like it's just another part of who I am. Very enthusiastic.
The internet is, you know, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's got a memory.
It's true.
So Dietlind has her glass of wine. Do you have your beer?
I have a bit. I have a beer, but I have this, which is it's a mezconi, which I've been into. So it's like a Negroni, but with mezcal. It's very yummy. So it's got this smell. Normally a Negroni is with gin, but I'm not like a super duper cocktail guy, but but the mezconi's got the mezcal, and it's got this smoky kind of thing. Plus, I bought it. I did a few months ago. I bought this bottle of Campari. I never knew how fucking bitter this stuff was. I
Oh, I love it.
No, and I do like it, but you got to figure out ways to use it. I made a cocktail for Alejandra. I was like, oh, you're gonna love these. I mean, and I forget what it was, but it might have been just a straight Negroni. And she took a sip and just, you know. So that's what I'm doing anyway.
Yeah.
So I have my tea. I just want you to know I'm armed.
Well,
yeah, that's good.
Depending on what happens, I have a beer over here.
I love how you're like, double fisting there. You're like, got backup plans.
I don't know. It was a long day.
What's that white screen next to you, Richard? What's that?
What?
What's that white screen that's next to you?
Oh, is that? I can turn that off. It's my monitor.
You have a couple different compute. You have a computer going, and what are you dialed in on an iPad?
I'm on an iPad. I don't have a camera on my computer.
Oh,
on my desktop.
Yeah.
So actually, let me turn it off.
I don't know.
Thanks for showing us.
It's a problem. Now we get to see your butt. We got back. Wow.
Okay.
I'm telling you, there's not much editing that's going to happen. So.
This
so
is
are we started?
I might bleep out the one time I cursed because somewhere somebody was like, there should be less cursing. And I know it's me
Oh,
because I can't help it. That's the way I
Well, he said, Dietlind, he said darn 3 times.
am.
darn. Yeah.
Yeah, and gosh, a couple too.
You can make like a big cloud or something that appears over your mouth, you know, when the swear happens, like a
That's
band-aid.
it, yeah. Again, it depends on how much effort I put into this later. Now, I think, now, Rich, I told you, Richard, I think Dietlind has actual questions for, I assume, primarily you. But I don't know. I feel like I should at least ask you, Dietlind, how this is going for you. How's the quarantine / distancing, whatever?
Yeah.
What are you spending your time doing?
I'm spending a lot of my time in the studio painting, actually. I mean, I've never had time like this. It's pretty unusual.
But are you being productive though? Do you feel
Yeah,
productive
yeah,
now?
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
being super productive, and it's kind of weird because I've heard from a lot of artists that just, you know, are not able to create right now. They're kind of paralyzed, and you know, and I can feel that. There were a few days where I was really, you know, like, you know, you go up and down where you know, it's
Yeah.
not directly affecting me in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm unemployed, but because
Well, I mean, we should say you're kind of I don't know.
in
Yeah.
a way it's kind of because I have all this time to paint, and I've never taken that time for myself. And so, you know, in addition to just being able to be productive, I even have some time to experiment, make some really weird stuff, which I don't usually let myself do too much. So, yeah, and I'm reading this book right now, Joseph Alber's The Interaction of Color.
Oh wow! Look at that.
I'm sure you've never heard of it.
Yeah. Here, look,
Color? No.
I brought this home today in case I wanted to read.
Yeah, that looks good.
Can you see it? Is it backwards?
No,
Okay,
yeah,
just backwards for
it
me.
is.
Ooh.
That
And
looks
I'm
like,
sure by tomorrow I'll
North.
have it. You know, the whole thing.
yeah. I also brought home, I brought home this book, which is really good for my studio today. Oh, this is a book of photographs by Scott Peterman. Can you see that?
Oh wow! Yeah.
He's this really interesting photographer that lives in Maine, somebody I know, and so every day I just flip it open to like these are all like little fishing shacks in Maine. I don't know if you can even see them or not, but they're really interesting. They're kind of, I mean, they kind of are a beautiful metaphor for woo. I just got big full screen. I touched something here.
Oh,
Wait.
you didn't have us
I
full
like being
screen?
able to see you guys. There we go.
You're not getting the full experience then.
Yeah, I'm getting a very full experience. Richard, your face is larger than life.
Oh, sorry. I'll sit back.
No, I like it. It's good.
I also, it's time for me to get a haircut and a beard trim, and I can't do that.
Yeah, I did. I heard one of the memes out there. That's my dog. One of the memes is like, you know, in a few more weeks, everyone's going to know what our natural hair colors are.
Yeah, I think 3 weeks ago I was supposed to get my hair cut, and
Yep.
I was wearing a hat today. But people who see me with a hat now are like, "Oh, what?" Because I haven't been wearing a hat for a couple of years, and that, like, just a ball cap. But
Yeah.
I was worried I'd show up and then it'd be like, whatever. I don't know. So I skipped it. And then I was like, maybe I'll grow a beard. But then I was like, why would I grow a beard? Like that? There's no reason for that.
Yeah, I thought about growing a beard myself, but I just
wait. I wanted to quickly. Speaking of.
Oh.
Because I'm actually meant to have this here in my hand, but it's upstairs. This is and so you made this beautiful catalog for your show, which is what, happening or not happening?
No, it's not happening. It was supposed to happen in the month of April, and it may happen in July. I'm not really sure. It'll just depend on how things unfold.
But how, like, I mean, how good is that, right?
I know.
You really nailed it with that. And we had it upstairs. You sent it to us, and then I had it in an envelope. When Alejandra got back, I was sure she would open it up, and then it kind of got buried under. We were both away for a while, and then suddenly she was like, "What's this?" And I was like, "Oh, that's the thing from Deal." And all that to say that it's really wonderfully done. It's in beautiful writing in it, and the images, like the whole thing is fantastic. So
Oh, thank you so
Spent some
much.
time with that the other day.
You know, that was a really fun project. It was, you know, it's like images of my paintings for the last few years, some of which are going to be in the show and some of which are just my favorite paintings. And then excerpts from the blog that I had been writing. And of course, you can't plan these things. So like the fact that like I've heard the word pause more in the last, you know, like 3 weeks than I'd heard it all year. And it's like a metaphor for everything right now. But the really fun thing about that is that I thought a few people would buy some copies of it, but instead like tons of people have bought it. People that have never met, even have sent it to friends. I did a special where people can send it to a friend. And then I've had their friends calling me up and ordering copies of it. So it's been really fun to get that out into the world and hear that it's good for people.
And I like and that reminded me of, speaking of, I don't have books like Richard has, but it reminded me of this, you know, this guy?
Oh yeah, I've heard of that book. I'm going to write that down.
Kind of, yeah, Austin Kleon.
Okay.
He's a good guy to follow on. And I bought it from the right place, so I got an actual like.
Oh wow! Look at that.
Yeah.
That should be the cover.
But the idea of like, which I occasionally try to do, but it's hard to do. But it's just sometimes it's like just get it out there. Like the stuff you're working on, just get it out there. Like show what you're doing. It doesn't need to be like that's what I struggle with a lot. Is just sort of like, no, we're just like this video. Like, am I going to sit here and edit it for? Like somebody's gonna go, well, you should have cut that part out. Like, well, by the time I cut all the things perfectly, it's not gonna get out.
Right.
So just get it out there. You know what I mean? Like just put out your work, let people know what you're doing. And I mean, I don't mean to suggest that the stuff you put out is not really well done, but
no. I understand.
Sense of like when you write things or when you post things that it's got that flavor to it of like, hey, here's a little bit of my process.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I think because I'm at the point where I am sort of putting content of some kind out into the world pretty regularly, I know that sometimes people think it's like easy, but I think that you feel vulnerable whenever you put yourself out into the world, whether it's sharing like an image of a painting that you're doing. I mean, I have all kinds of paintings that I haven't shared because they don't feel like I know that I'll hear back things I'm not ready to hear about them or whatever, you know. But it's hard. I was telling somebody today, I was telling a friend that I was talking to in California that who recently sent something out via email that she felt a little vulnerable about, but it was really cool writing. And I said, you know, like when I first was getting ready to do an email blast, I like said, I'm going to do it this Christmas. You know, this was years ago. And then it took me like a full year to actually do it. Like a whole year beyond that. And I remember when I sent my first e-blast, I was like, I had labored over it and everything. And then I watched like people unsubscribe, you know, because you can like see, you can actually like see the timing and you can see like the reasons if they gave a reason. But, you know, and I remember in the beginning it was like devastating, but now I don't feel that way. I feel like if you don't want to receive it, you shouldn't be on that list. I shouldn't be paying to send it to you anyway. And you just it gets easier and easier, I think, to share out there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do, but yeah, you do a good job with it.
Well, thanks, Darin. Thank you.
So we can pivot to, do you actually have questions?
I actually have a little list of questions because yeah, and they're all for you, Richard, and there's some trick questions. I'm just kidding. There's no trick questions. And there's no really personal questions either. But I thought, you know, if we posted this on social media and it tagged me in it, I know some of my students ask these questions a lot. And so I thought, well, I've got, you know, you two right there. I've got access to you so I could have the experts answer the questions. But before I do that, when I got to the bottom of the list of the questions, I thought, well, I actually am curious. Have you guys had any cool creative ideas that you've come up with since you're not working as much right now, ostensibly, and have a little more time? Have you had any interesting ideas that you've come up with?
Going over, I wouldn't call it inspiring, financial stuff for the arts district. And and I've been working on an exhibit that's going to be at the university at SUNY New Paltz, hopefully in the near future, and that's I'm trying to think of all the things I've been doing, and I mean, it's like my whole day has been is busy, and I try and think of what was it I did, and it's like well, I answered a bunch of emails, and yeah, I think, and I've been thinking stuff of the about color, the color theory workshop that I do, that especially the one that I was going to do at the conference, and but I'm still working on it, and so it gives me just more time to play with. It's just new stuff that keeps coming up, and so it's just something that I'm playing with. So it's very exciting. It feels more exciting when I'm making it sound. You should have given me some time to prepare the answer.
So I've been surprised at how much just this whole thing has been. I keep thinking of things I ought to be doing. I think we were texting about that a little bit. Like, I have ideas, or I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go in and do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna. I mean, things that we've wanted to do but haven't been able to get around to. I mean, this is one in a sense, but even days that I'm like, what did I really do? I'm just surprised how much it's been consuming of my, like, mentally and whatever. And a lot of it for us is figuring out how to, we don't have people working right now, but we're paying, we're trying to figure out, like, what's the path forward. And like, tomorrow's a big day, because tomorrow's the day that some of this SBA loan small business stuff is coming available. So, it's not super creative, but it's, so what I'm really hoping is that we get to a point where we can see, okay, here's how everybody, we can pay the staff, keep them on staff, so that when we're ready, boom, we can go.
Yeah.
And then if that question was answered, here's what it's going to cost from us, from the government, then I feel like I could maybe go like, okay, here's how long I have where I can put that aside.
Yeah.
And not worry about people. And then hopefully tackle these other things, which are all kind of, whether it's making a video about whatever, or just some things at the shop, there's things where I'm like, oh, I could be our little kitchen in the shop. I'm like, I was in there today. I'm like, I should pull out all these it's been a while. I'm going to pull these out and put in a new countertop. And it's like, that was today. I had that in my head. And then I was like, I don't have time for that right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's.
No, it is. I mean, there's no right answer. I was just thinking, it's like there can be a lot of paralysis. You listen to the news for a couple hours in the morning, you kind of bring yourself up to speed, and then, and then there's just like this point of like just sheer like sadness, this like collective sadness that kind of, I don't know for you, but washes over me. And I think what's helped me is, like, I do have access to my studio. So go into the studio and I turn the music up as loud as I can, and I just paint. And it's kind of like, once I get going with that, it's sort of like I tap into that space where all these ideas are just coming. So I've had like a bunch of great ideas, and it feels like I have access and time to be thinking about those creatively, like giveaways and different kinds of projects I want to work on, and blog posts to write, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, I think I just need to like figure out a way to allocate the time to that. I did a little bit, and I was inspired by I was watching the Jeff and Helen thing on Facebook, and somebody was just talking about, and it's like, I know this intuitively. Like, I have outside of this room a space it's not really a studio. It's like, it's a little bit wood shop, it's a little bit bike repair, it's a little bit, I could paint if I want, I mean, it's everything, but it's a mess, or it was a mess. Now it's like half a mess, because I did get inspired to just spend a few hours doing what you just said, which was listen to some music.
Yep.
and just find a place for some things.
Yeah.
And even that felt really good. And that's always the first step for me, is like organize the space a little bit. And it actually reminds me from years ago, my grandmother, I think, was visiting this area, and my mom and dad, they went up to the Norman Rockwell Museum, and they came. Well, I remember then they came and they visited me, and they were talking about how this story about how he, and grain of salt with the whole thing, but about how important it was for him to sweep his studio like every day.
Mm-hmm.
And just the sweeping and the clean, like that's just like a part of, like that was part of the process.
Yeah.
It's like he didn't have a paintbrush in his hand, but the sweeping was a part of like the beginning and the end. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, there's
I
that.
love that. I've been good at doing the opposite. I'm letting myself be messy, which I'm never messy in my studio, so it feels good. But all right, so I do have some questions here, and before we run out of time, I'm gonna hit you with some of the world's deepest and most profound questions.
Okay.
About
I think we have about 20 minutes.
Oh, we do? Oh,
I think
okay.
so.
All right. Well,
Depending on how you.
Richard might really go off on one of these subjects, so.
Absolutely.
Then I get to watch Darin shake his head and say, "Oh no."
And then his eyes roll back into his head.
Yeah. That's exactly what it's like.
So, Richard, this first question is for you.
Great.
What is encaustic bloom?
Oh.
And again, I'm not asking this for myself. These are questions that I get all the time in my classes.
Yeah.
I want to hear your answer.
Encaustic bloom is usually contaminants in the wax that migrate to the surface, but they can also be a reaction with the I mean, there are different kinds of bloom, I think, caused by different things. If you, when you paint just a normal painting, and it'll get a dusting on it, and you wipe it down, that's usually the contaminants. Sometimes it's also a reaction with between free fatty acids and like free calcium in a pigment, like free calcium in ivory black, because ivory black is burnt bone. So sometimes, and this is what I've heard. I mean, I've just, it's not like I did a study of it really. It was just asking around, or searching around and finding some answers. But also, it's also happened when people paint with encaustic with just straight beeswax and no resin, and it's exposed to cold. You can get. I've heard of this. I know.
Oh.
Sorry. And it's and because because it's the wax is and isn't a saturated hydrocarbon, it'll be reactive in the cold, and I'm not exactly sure why. And in fact, it's been years since I've answered that question on the cold. I remember somebody who lived in Nova Scotia who kept having that problem, and it turned out she was using the Damar resin helps to saturate the wax, and I'm not really capable of describing saturation and non and
That's okay. I don't think we need to go down.
You don't want to hear it anyway.
No, I mean, like sometimes a student will point out, like a darker color. Some of the darker colors, you'll see those get more cloudy over time, and if you just buff it, then it restores the shine, or it's not quite as cloudy. And is that what you're talking about when you're talking about encaustic bloom, or is that separate from encaustic bloom?
No. That's exactly what can happen. I mean, it seems like there are a number of different reasons for it. It's very different from the bloom you get in varnish, for instance. Okay. And the bloom in varnish is because moisture got into the varnish, and like it was a humid day or something.
And I would
moist,
add
but
what we've seen is that if I may, the
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because I actually have answered this question more recently, is that what we've seen is that if you do buff it and get rid of the bloom, it tends to diminish over time, particularly if you keep
right.
it in a consistent environment, which is where it goes back to what he's saying about the cold. So there
Mm-hmm.
seems to be something, and I have some papers with that, but it's like I can share them with you, but it's like it's such a yawner.
Yeah,
But it seems to be when the temperature fluctuates, that's where a lot of this stuff happens. But if it's like, so if you own a painting and it's in your house, and assuming your house is somewhat climate stable, and you wipe it, it'll lessen, that effect will diminish over time.
So I was wondering, because I use pigment sticks on the surface and linseed oil on the surface of all my paintings, and I don't see any bloom. And I'm wondering
Yeah.
if that oil, once it's cured, if that also prevents or acts as some kind of skin or barrier between that temperature
oh, hello,
the surface, like you're talking
Yeah.
about.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, what Darin mentioned was is actually, I mean, just think about it. When the temperature fluctuates, as I said, it can be a migration of certain impurities that got into the paint, and when the temperature changes, it's creating a kind of a contraction, and expansion, and it would drive some of those things to the surface, and as he said, after a while you run out of those impurities and it stops happening. But there are some cases when it does happen, like especially when it happened because of exposure to cold, and as I remember, just a very slight warming of the surface will help to get rid of it.
Interesting.
So
Even,
that but
even
just try wiping it
actually,
first.
yeah, the warmth from your hand could even help. Okay,
Yeah.
so the next question, did we answer that one? Did we
Yeah,
answer
I think we're good on that one for
I think
now.
we killed it.
You want more? Email one of us.
Okay, all right, that's a good one. Okay, so why use encaustic gesso? I mean, beyond the fact that I explain to students that it creates like a sense of radiant white light behind a painting. If you're using a lot of transparent layers, tints, things like that. But if they're going to cover the whole painting with like an opaque color, and you're not going to see that, is there any other purpose in using encaustic gesso? For example, because of that small amount of acrylic in there, does it help alleviate bubbles? I have students.
The main reason to use an encaustic gesso, and we're assuming from what you're saying, not just because it's white, but you want it because it's absorbent, and it holds, it adheres well. We did a test of different surfaces a number of years ago, about 40 different surfaces, metal, glass, regular acrylic gesso, all kinds of things, it was actually the encaustic gesso was really the encaustic adhered really well to it, and we really distressed the hell out of it. We froze it, we thawed it, we smacked it, we scored it, and really tried to get, do things that would make it break off, even at the end putting some gauze on top, and then painting encaustic medium over it so that it really stuck to that surface, and then pulling up and seeing what happened. And the encaustic gesso was great because it was absorbent. And it also gives you an absorbent white surface. That's not, if you use, say, white paper, the encaustic is going to transparentize the paper and darken it. But this, it won't darken. The gesso, it won't darken. So that's the.
Okay, great.
Do you have anything to
add to that, Darin?
Oh, Jess, it's the same. It's just like the bloom. We could go on about it forever. Oh my gosh, there's acrylic in the binder. What do we do?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was snarky, but I answer that question so often on Facebook. We spent, 20-something years telling people that never paint on acrylic, and then we created a gesso that has acrylic as the binder.
Right.
That's all I'm going
Right.
to say.
Well, we do have that article as a download. And so I was going to
yeah.
segue into mentioning we have our resources section on the website, which is pretty awesome.
Yes.
And one of the things that you could download in the resource section is information about encaustic gesso, including that article.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I mean, no binder is absorbent. Rabbit skin glue, which is the basis for glue gesso. Anything, nothing is absorbent. Glue is not absorbent. It's the ratio of the glue to the filler.
Oil is not. None of them are absorbent. Yeah. It's the solids that make the difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Okay. So pigment sticks. When you get a pigment stick and you take it out of the plastic tube and you unwrap it, it has a skin on it. What's your preferred means of getting rid of the skin? Shay, my dog is catching a bug here behind me.
So my quick answer, my preferred means is if there still is a skin, and it depends on the cut, because some of them dry faster than others based on the pigment. Especially like say a raw umber, which dries really quickly. I'll take a like a razor blade and kind of slit around a little bit and make some slices, and then I take a paper towel and just wipe it, and then it's fresh. I mean, and if it's something that has a thinner skin than that, you don't need the razor blade. You just wipe it with a paper towel.
I heard that Kelly had advised some students to use mineral oil. Have you ever used mineral oil to break down?
I mean, you can do that. Give it a
just to loosen it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would be. I just don't usually have mineral oil around.
I don't have any mineral oil
but
either.
I usually have a rag. So.
Yep.
It's just,
I would make sure
some people really get troubled by the skin, but it's really not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually some people use that skin, leave the skin in there for texture. But mineral oil, if you do use mineral oil, make sure to wipe it off after you've used it, because it's a non-drying oil and it's going to affect your drying. So you don't want to, I mean, it may be good for getting the skin off, but then just wipe it off too.
Okay.
So,
okay, so why is our tagline unique color? Can you tell me a little bit about why we're unique? I know that like the vast majority of people working for RNF are all artists, and I'm still dying to get the stories of all the artists at RNF up on our website at some point. If people support it, I think it's so cool to know that the folks doing everything from making paint to managing the office are incredible artists. But I was wondering if you could just tell me about what makes our color unique.
Man, first of all, we've got like 2 or 3 minutes probably, and then we'll get cut off. Shit.
I wish you'd ask this question first.
It starts with the beginning of how we were sort of making color, and of course, that's Richard, and he had the idea. We make colors that you're not going to see in other lines, and we always look at all the other. We mostly look at tube oils. I mean, we make a stick and we make an encaustic, which are very unique in their own right because of the sort of form factor, but the color itself, I think of colors like sap green, which is a blend of 3 pigments that it's really difficult to mix that by yourself, especially consistently. There's these other ones that, like Richard would call, he would talk about them as transitional colors, and they're very delicate blends that people will say, well, if you mix that many color pigments together, you're going to get mud. Well, we don't get mud. We get Jean Brillant, we get warm pink, we get blue ochre, olive yellow. I mean, these are colors that there's a delicate balance between sort of mineral pigments like raw sienna and organic pigments like a quinacridone or whatever. And they're hard to do, but we do it in a way that I think is the terms out there all the time, like small batch, when you talk about all these different things, but that's part of the way we do it at our size. We don't have the advantage of making huge batches of things. There's advantages there, but there's advantages to being small, and then you can you can do a lot of things that maybe larger manufacturers can't. I don't know. I could go on for like an hour about that, but Richard, maybe you can add something.
Well, I just wanted to say that we're one of the only companies that makes a large number of mixes, and they're not just adding white. They're sometimes 3 and 4 pigments, and as Darin said, they could easily be mud, and it's very difficult doing that. I mean, it's first of all the color matching from when each time we make a batch, matching it to our standard can be really time consuming and difficult. There's a reason why companies don't normally do that. The labor involved is huge, but I mean, frankly, there's so much labor in it that I like to say, if you judge pigment our paints by how much labor we put into it, a neutral gray would be a series 7, and a neutral gray would be a series 7, and a cadmium red would be a series 1. Because they're a cadmium is easy to mill, but a neutral gray which has 4 pigments in it is not, and you have to balance the umber and the cobalt blue in it. But I do want to say one thing that's really wonderful. Darin said, well, I started developing these, when we started the company, but the last 2 or 3 batches of new colors have been all entirely done by the paint making crew. Mm-hmm. I mean, they get it, and this is one of the most satisfying things to see this passed on. That there's this continuation within the company and they've been some brilliant mixes. I mean, the turkey red, the blue ochre,
the seconds
olive
here,
yellow.
Richard.
Huh?
We're only got a few seconds here, Richard.
Oh, okay. I'll just leave it at that.
I think we're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah. That's why I love working for you guys,
Well, we love having you on board. And I would say he says it's just a payment, but it's a whole team effort.
Yeah.
Of what we do, and including the artists that we work with outside of the company that we send paints
Absolutely.
to.
Yeah.
Dietlind, thank you for taking some time out of your.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.